All right. Hello, everybody. Tara Baklund here. And today we have another episode of Herbs in Spanglish. And today we're covering thyme or tomillo.
Yeah. Hey, everyone. Alberto Carbo here. Buenos días, buenas tardes, buenas noches, wherever you are. Happy to see you again. And yeah, as Tara said, we have another herb this week, and it's tomillo or thyme. Which hopefully everyone has heard of. I assume everyone has. Yeah, it's a pretty common one. Super común. Tomillo. If you've ever, cooked, you've probably experimented with thyme. And if you've ever gardened, you've probably wanted to grow it because it's a great culinary herb. Entonces, si alguna vez has cocinado, probablemente has usado el tomillo, y si alguna vez jardineaste para cultivar hierbitas para tu cocina, probablemente fue una de las primeras. So yeah, well, why don't we start with Tara? What is your favorite way to cook with thyme? Because it's such a common herb that is there a particular dish that you like to put it in, or?
Esto es una buena pregunta. This is a good question because I actually don't use it much. Yo no uso esta hierba mucho porque no me gusta mucho del sabor de esta hierba. Pero depende, claro, de la comida. It depends on the food, right? Maybe I just have not made it in a way that is really pleasing to me. So I'm excited actually to learn from you today because you've worked in the kitchens, has trabajado en la cocina bastante. Entonces me gustaría aprender cómo usar mejor o cocinar mejor con el tomillo por esto.
Sí, pues el tomillo es versátil, pero es verdad, tiene un sabor fuerte. It's a versatile herb, but it is true. It does have a strong, strong scent and a strong taste. Tiene un olor fuerte y un sabor fuerte. Entonces, it can be overpowering if you use it by itself. Absolutely. And especially too if you use too much. So combination, sí, es fuerte, es una hierba fuerte, entonces puede dominar el sabor de un plato, especialmente si se usa mucho. Y it's easy to use a lot because the leaves are so tiny. You think, oh, it's not just, you don't think it doesn't, the leaves are so small that you really wouldn't think that they have such a strong flavor. Las hojas son bien chiquitas, bien pequeñas, entonces uno pensaría que no podrían dar tan fuerte sabor, pero la verdad es que sí.
Pero esa es una propiedad bien común de hierbas que son fuertes, mismo en cantidades pequeñas son fuertes. So that's a really common property of herbs that even in small amounts, they will typically have a strong flavor or sensation.
Sí, y eso es especialmente verdadero, or it's especially true of the aromatic plants, las plantas aromáticas, la cual tomillo es una. Thyme is an aromatic plant. And the reason why is the volatile oils, son los aceites volátiles que las plantas aromáticas tienen, the aromatic plants have, are easily dispersed into the environment. La planta las suelta muy fácilmente, y es por eso puede ser un olor o sabor muy fuerte fácilmente. That's why it can be easily overpower a dish, because the oils volatilize and they just disperse into kind of whatever you're putting them into. Pero tal vez deberíamos empezar, or we should start with a classic way of using thyme. And of course, in French cuisine, a lot of our modern day cooking has been influenced by French cuisine. And French cuisine was really great because it was one of the first to really lay out a structure or a base or a kind of an ideology of how to cook. Entonces la comida francesa es una fuerza culinaria que impactó al mundo entero, y muchas de las cosas que los franceses, de los sistemas y los métodos que los franceses se inventaron o establecieron, han influido el mundo culinario a través del mundo. And so one of the, if you've cooked, you've probably heard this, but Herbes de Provence, or herbs de Provence, this is a classic herbal mixture for culinary purposes. And it comes from Provence, or the region in France called Provence. And it's traditionally made with savory, marjoram, rosemary, thyme, and oregano. And then lavender was sometimes added to it, but that is more of a New World addition. And this Herbe de Provence was used as a mix in many different dishes. Entonces esta mezcla de esas hierbas fue utilizada en muchos, o es utilizada en muchos platos franceses. My favorite way to use thyme is probably, well, I wouldn't say my favorite, but the most applicable or the most useful way is with the Herbe de Provence. And it doesn't have to be those herbs that I mentioned. Even just with thyme and rosemary, or thyme and oregano, maybe some lavender, making your stock with those herbs, whether you're making a vegetable stock, or you're making a chicken or beef stock, it's a great addition. Entonces, para hacer una base de un caldo de base, se puede utilizar el tomillo, también las otras herbes de Provence, pero no son necesarias todas, y simplemente tomillo, romero, tal vez un poco de lavanda. Eso ayuda a darle un muy buen sabor a el caldo. And of course, your stock is your base for, if you're making a sauce, or if you're just using it to cook with, for soup, whatever you're making, is your base. So you want it to be very flavorful. And dale.
I was just going to ask, the kitchens that you worked in, was there a lot of French influence? En las cocinas donde trabajabas, ¿tuvo mucha influencia francesa?
Pues algunas sí, otras no. Por un buen rato trabajé en un restaurante italiano, el cual tomillo también se usa. Pero cuando estuve en la escuela culinaria, when I went to culinary school, the basis, and from my understanding, a lot of culinary schools are based in French cuisine, because they set up sort of a system of progression. You make your base, like you have like a base of ingredients and a base of understanding of certain dishes, which you can use to make other things. So it's kind of a systematic way of cooking. Entonces la forma francesa tradicional de cocinar es muy sistémica, y usan bases, las cuales las convierten en platos o salsas y componentes diferentes. Entonces I did study it in school, and out of interest, because in our modern world, some of the first restaurants and whatnot were in France. So there's a lot of history there.
Entonces, un caldo sería un base. A stock would be one of these bases in French cooking.
Ajá. Sí, sí, exacto. French cooking, por ejemplo, you make your beef stock, and by reducing your beef stock, then you'd get a demi-glaze. And from there, you could make several different sauces for several different dishes. Yeah, like a classic French dish is or sauce is the velouté, and it's kind of like a bechamel sauce. And you can make it with chicken stock, and it's mostly for chicken dishes. And thyme goes great with chicken. El tomillo y el pollo hacen un muy buen conjunto. Claro, tomillo con carne de res o carne de cerdo o otras carnes, with other meats, thyme is a great combo. But with chicken, it really, yeah, it really kind of flourishes. It's a really good combination. Y el lado de herborista, or from the herbal side, we have to ask ourselves, well, sure, this herb tasted delicious, but could there be a different reason why why it was so important for people to combine with their food? Entonces, ¿será que había otra razón por la cual la gente usaba el tomillo con la comida, aparte del sabor delicioso? And if we look at the properties of thyme, thyme is a carminative. So it means it is promoting gastric secretions for digestion. And of course, if you're eating meats or anything heavy, that you want to promote that digestion. So thyme absolutely does that. El tomillo ayuda a promover los jugos gástricos, entonces combina muy bien con cualquier carne o proteína animal, porque promueve la digestión o el proceso de digestión natural del cuerpo. Which is, brings us to the amazingness, how incredible herbs are. They taste good, but they also help us. Las hierbas así no solo tienen buen sabor, pero también nos apoyan y nos ayudan a digerir y asimilar los nutrientes, because of course carminatives and herbs that help gastric secretions are helping you digest, but they're also helping you absorb all of the nutrients in the food. Yeah, let's see.
Yeah, they say that, when you smell a food and your mouth salivates, you start salivating. That's the first step in digestion, right? And that helps to break down the food better, and therefore you can absorb the nutrients better, just like you're saying. Entonces, cuando la palabra es hueles, la comida y si siente bien, o el huelo es a ti siente parezca bien. ¿Cómo
huele
bien? Entonces empiezas a, how would you say, salivate? Probably it's really similar.
Salivar.
Salivar. Entonces son los primeros pasos de digestión, y como dijiste, ayuda en la digestión.
Sí, ayuda mucho. Y otra cosa interesante, or another interesting thing, es que thyme es alto en un aceite llamado thymol o thymol. Entonces, thyme is high in thymol, which is antimicrobial, antiseptic, and antiviral. El thymol es antiséptico, antiviral y antimicrobial. And we know that, especially if you've traveled, or if in many parts of the world, it's hot. It's very hot, and food, food goes bad when it's hot. Food, bacteria tends to grow in food when it's really hot out. La bacteria se produce o se multiplica en la comida en los ambientes o en climas calientes más fácilmente que en los fríos. So in a way, cooking with thyme is kind of like a helpful way to help preserve your food. Of course, it's not going to prevent your food from going bad, but you see this in India as well. So many of the herbs and spices they use have these antimicrobial, antibacterial qualities to them as well. So whether they intended to do that, no sé si fue a propósito que hicieron eso, pero en todo caso es otro componente de la planta.
Mm-hmm. It's like we say in English, which came first, the chicken or the egg? Do they taste good together because we learned that they help in digestion, or what is it, right? I can't even describe. ¿Tienen la misma frase en español? ¿Cuál?
No.
Algo similar.
No puedo pensar en este momento. I can't think of the similar saying in this moment, but
entonces es más o menos, ¿cuál era primero? ¿Cómo es? ¿El huevo o
la gallina?
¿Cómo es?
Gallina.
Gallina, gracias, porque hay varias palabras por este animal. Entonces, ¿cuál era primero? Hierba, porque de una manera sabíamos que era bueno para digestión, o descubrimos que era bueno para el cuerpo solamente porque el sabor combinó bien con carnes, como dijiste. I don't know. It's something I think that's pretty miraculous continually about herbs. Which was first? Did we understand that they were good for us, or did it just kind of evolve that way?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a good question, and this brings us back to some of the history, which doesn't really answer that question, but at least it gives us a glimpse that they very well knew about thyme's antiseptic qualities. The oldest record, los récords más viejos, más antiguos de el uso del tomillo, or the oldest records of the use of thyme, come from Sumerian scripts, o de escrituras de Sumaria, de hace más de 3,000 años. So over 3,000 years ago, where they wrote that it was an antiseptic herb. So antiseptic, if we think about that word, sepsis means infection, means like putrefaction. Séptico significa, just think of like a septic tank. It's stuff that's kind of it's waste essentially. Entonces una hierba antiséptica previene la sepsis, o previene la infección. So an antiseptic herb will prevent infection, prevent that putrefaction of tissue. And in ancient Egypt, it is known that thyme was used in the embalming process. So, of course, never having or knowing very little about mummification, I would assume you would want to preserve the body as much as possible. And so if you have a substance that is antiseptic or helps slow down rotting, it would make sense that you would use it.
It's a really common ingredient in sausages. No, es un ingrediente muy común en salchicha. Y es la única manera que yo creo que es la única manera que yo uso lo uso. I think that's the only way I really use it is in sausages, but it makes sense because in sausages, usually they're combining meats or fats. Normalmente cuando hagan unas salchichas, combinan carnes o por lo mínimo hay muchas grasas, es grasa. Y entonces necesita una hierba para ayudar a la digestión, pero también puede ayudar a no spoil. How do you say spoil?
Preservar. To preserve.
Para preservar la salchicha. So to me, that's the only way that I've really remembered using thyme, and it combines really well in a sausage, which is usually sausages either combine meats or they have a lot of fat, again, helping digestion. But also you think of the old ways where people would have sausage. You imagine like the old shops, with sausages hanging from the ceiling. They didn't necessarily refrigerate them. They would have herbs in them, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I wouldn't be surprised if they absolutely knew that by putting thyme or similar herbs in the sausages, that it would help to prevent or slow down the rotting, I guess, or the going of that food going bad.
Mm-hmm.
They must have known, because if they knew 3,000 years ago.
Right. Maybe they didn't know the science. Es probable que no supieron la ciencia de la hierba, pero sabían por la experiencia. They knew by experience.
Sí, por la experiencia. Y bueno, entonces en Egipto usaban el tomillo en el proceso de momificación. O sea, cuando momificaban a un faraón o algo así, usaban el tomillo para, me imagino, lavar el cuerpo o para preservar el cuerpo lo más posible en ese proceso. Y lo que preserva, or the preserving agent, the active ingredient, I guess, is the thymol, el timol, y es antibacterial, antifungal, or antibacterial, antifungal, y antiséptico, or antiseptic. Y bueno, eso fue a través del tiempo, or as time went on, la reputación, or the reputation of thyme as a protection, because we can kind of think of that as a form of protection, right? We're protecting ourselves from bacteria or from viruses. So in ancient Rome, this thyme had this reputation of being for protection. En la Roma antigua, el tomillo mantuvo esa reputación de ser una hierba protectiva, si pensamos como protegernos de un virus o una bacteria. But what was interesting is that it kind of, people started using it, burning it for protection. So using the smoke as either like a cleansing agent or a protective agent. La gente empezó a quemar el tomillo como para protegerse, como un agente, o sea, usando el humo como protección. And then also to purify a space, or to purify their home, or priests would use it, priests would burn it, los sacerdotes quemaban el tomillo, también la gente en sus casas para purificarlas. And interestingly, protection is kind of similar, synonymous with courage, because to protect yourself, you have to have the courage to do it. And so thyme became a symbol of courage amongst Roman soldiers. And they would frequently exchange it as a sign of respect, or give it, a young lady may give it to her lover who was going off to battle as a sign of like as a good omen of protection. Entonces, sí, los soldados se intercambiaban el tomillo como como una demostración de respeto, o la gente se ponía tomillo o sea, cargaban el tomillo con ellos para como una señal de protección, y tal vez una joven mujer que su amante se va a la batalla, a la guerra, le daría eso a su amante como deseando que lo proteja y pueda regresar.
¿Sabes lo que es interesante? Que me, I don't know what like occurred to me, me ocurrió ahorita mismo, es que hay un órgano, ¿es órgano?
Órgano. Ajá.
Órgano, que se llama Thymus en inglés.
Ajá.
¿Es lo mismo en español? Que
Sí.
es que cuando dices que es Thyme, Tomillo, es como coraje. Yo sé solo un poquito de francés, pero lo que yo sé de la palabra coraje, or courage, what I know about the word courage is that it comes from the root word core. And so I was saying is what just occurred to me is that we have this organ that's called the thymus, literally in English. So thymus is the first part of the botanical name. En el nombre botánico empieza con Thymus, que es como el órgano Thymus en inglés. Entonces, esta área es del core, o corazón, o coraje, o courage. Entonces, ¿hay algo similar? ¿O por qué? ¿Qué es esto?
Sí, tienes toda la razón. El nombre latín del tomillo, Thymus, Thymus, or Thymus, is the Latin name or the botanical name of thyme. Y Thymus viene del griego de thumos, que significa coraje, or Thymus came from Thymus, which means courage in Greek. And they say that they named the thymus gland because it has the shape of the thymus gland is pretty identical to the shape of a thyme leaf. Entonces dicen que el nombre, los griegos nombraron la glándula, la glándula thymus.
Tenemos que buscar la palabra.
Sí, ahora me estoy dudando. Glándula timo.
Okay.
Era
Estoy buscando una foto I'm looking for a photo of the thymus gland para comparar.
Súper, sí, porque entonces en griego dicen que nombraron la glándula timo así porque se parecía tanto la forma de la glándula a la hoja del tomillo. But I love what you were saying about, because it's here and it's close to the heart, and of course cœur in French is courage. So and we associate someone who's courageous, someone that has a lot of heart, or someone that is entonces hay algo, there's definitely an interesting association there.
Imagino también que la energía del sistema inmune es como, si tienes mucha energía en ese sistema, so if you have a lot of energy in your immune system, it's similar al coraje. It's similar to courage. You know, if you're like, okay, it's flu season, and you're like, I can do it. You know, I'm not going to get sick. Entonces, en estación también es estación de influenza o de gripe, algo así. En español. Cuando entras en este periodo, sí, con coraje, para mí la energía es igual, de tener mucha energía en el sistema inmune, y también el coraje de entrar en ese periodo. So if you enter into the flu season, like, I'm not going to get sick, you literally, it's like having courage for that.
Yeah, totally. And if you think about it along those lines, like the thymus gland helps in our immune response. So it's kind of like they're kind of like the soldiers of our body, protecting our body and making sure the boundaries are not that the boundaries are respected. Entonces la glándula timo tiene mucho que ver con la inmunidad y cómo nuestro cuerpo responde a un ataque inmunológico. Y en muchas maneras el tomillo era así, que era regalado o representaba el coraje de los soldados que iban a proteger el imperio o expander el imperio romano.
Yeah, it's so interesting. There's so much of this history in each herb. Cada hierba tiene una historia, tiene significado aquí, así que, no sé, and even in English, I'm trying to think of how, like, there's just like this magical, amazing evolution, right?
Sí, es increíble. It's hard to reconcile it all because it's like little bits of different like throughout time, different people have different uses and different ideas about it, but if we look over time, they're very similar. Sí, aunque las ideas tal vez sean diferentes de cultura a cultura, como que tienen algo en común.
Y otra cosa interesante es que en inglés time es tiempo. Entonces, cada vez que digas time, también piensas es tiempo. And of course, in English, we already know that time and time they sound like the same word, but they're different words. And so maybe that has something to do with it too. Or like the preservation, the mummification is preserving it in time. Por ejemplo, la mumificación es preservar en tiempo, o como digamos en inglés es time, es la misma, es el mismo sonido, pero no es la misma palabra.
Sí, qué interesante. Y sí, total. Y bueno, y la segunda parte del nombre latín, que es vulgaris, Thymus vulgaris, or Thymus vulgaris. Vulgaris means common. So you'll see lots of herbs, especially like the garden herbs, or the more common herbs will have vulgaris, and it just means it's a common herb. Entonces el vulgaris en el nombre botánico significa que era una planta muy común, muy very common or abundant. ¿Qué más? Y bueno, eso nos
y origina en los países mediterráneos. So it's very common. Maybe it's common, even maybe grows in the wild. I would imagine probably grows more wild in the Mediterranean regions. Y los áreas mediterráneos también es como partes de California. So the parts of California also have that kind of environment, and they grow really well. I have a hard time growing lavender, thyme. They in that kind of environment, you know, I don't know about you, but certain plants for me, I can grow a lot of plants, but there's certain ones, especially the Mediterranean ones, I don't know, I just don't have the green thumb, as we say, for them. No sé qué lo que es para ti, pero unas hierbas son difíciles para mí. No es, creo que no dicen en español crecer, pero cultivar, sí. Estas hierbas mediterráneas son difíciles para mí. ¿Cómo para ti?
Sí, definitivamente he encontrado a través del tiempo que tener, o sea, tierra o suelo como suelto, like rocky soil is good for thyme and the Mediterranean herbs, lavender, porque el agua se tiene que poder ir, y no echar mucha agua. Entonces, porque allá muchas veces la única agua que recibían era lo que venía del mar, o sea, el vapor de agua, the mist of the ocean would be sometimes the only water they would receive. But even still, I had a lavender bush for 4 years and it was doing great, but it died.
De repente.
De repente dijo, no más.
Yeah, that sounds like my experience, but it's only after a few months.
Yeah, I think the heavy winters too are not, yeah, like a few, maybe if they make it a couple of years, that's probably a lot.
Yeah, I imagine too that the lack of sunlight here. I mean, you can use lights and so forth, but we both live in the north. Vives en Canadá, yo vivo en el norte de los Estados Unidos. Imagino, a lo mejor es un excuso que porque yo no soy capaz de cultivar estas hierbas, pero pienso que a veces que es el ambiente aquí. So I wonder, it's just such a different environment. Maybe it's just an excuse, but.
No, I think so. It's trickier. You have to kind of accommodate for that difference in environment. Like, entonces, sí, es difícil cultivar ciertas plantas. Al igual que, o sea, cultivar plantas trópicas acá no funciona muy bien tampoco. Yeah, like tropical plants growing up here, it doesn't really work that well. Sí, bueno, otro uso del tomillo en la historia, or in history, another use in the history, was in the Middle Ages, en las edades medias, especialmente o notablemente, notably around the time of the bubonic plague, o the Black Death, la muerte negra, la plaga bubónica of the Middle Ages, which was a respiratory illness. Era una enfermedad respiratoria. And if anyone has heard of have you heard of Terra of the Thieves? Hay una mezcla, sí, como una combinación, una fórmula de aceites esenciales llamada Thieves, y Thieves en inglés significa ladrón o sí, ladrón. There's many words for thieves, I guess, but and the reason was, the story was that, these thieves that kept robbing people who had died in their homes, but they weren't getting the bubonic plague, they weren't getting sick, and it turns out they had combined different herbs, essential oils, and they would rub it all over their face and on masks that they would wear, and this prevented them from getting sick. Entonces, los ladrones ponían una combinación de ciertas hierbas en sus máscaras y en su cara, y entraban a las casas de la gente que había muerto por la plaga bubónica y robaban lo que fuera, pero no se enfermaban. So thyme was not part of those herbs, but it was used for its antiseptic qualities and cleaning wounds and helping people who were sick. And yeah, so it's very interesting. Que el tomillo no era parte de ese Thieves, de esa fórmula Thieves, pero fue usada mucho en la época de la plaga bubónica por sus propiedades antisépticas. And I would imagine that maybe some people used it, if they knew, that they may have used it. And I will say that at the beginning of COVID, when we didn't know what was going on and all that, I definitely, when I had to go to the grocery store, for example, or be in public, I would spray my mask with a bunch of different essential oils, and I think it helped. I don't know.
Yeah, I have a hand cleanser that's just an easy spray cleanser too. It's thyme based, and it I trust in that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Would you say sanitizer?
Como
Is Dor or Dora?
sanitadora.
Eso es eso que imaginaba.
Sí, no uso esa palabra.
Yo tengo un spray muy simple, es fácil para poner en la bolsa. Y también yo hice un a cleaner, un limpiador hecho de vinagre y también tomillo. Pero yo pensaba when I was telling you about, oh, I think I know of a recipe, like one recipe with thyme, it was this recipe. Entonces, cuando estábamos discutiendo sobre esta clase o este episodio de discutir tomillo, yo recordaba esta receta de un limpiador. Yo recordaba que era un limpiador que dejaba el vinagre este color, pero no era el tomillo que dejaba el vinagre este color, es lavanda o
Lavanda.
So I thought when we were discussing this episode that I was like, oh, I do know a recipe that I can share. And I thought it was thyme that I remembered a recipe that you can use vinegar, just white vinegar, and add it to thyme. And I looked at it the next day, and it only takes really a matter of hours to change it to this color. But I was like, oh, it's not changing color. And then I remembered, oh, I think it's lavender. So this is thyme and lavender. But if you want a pretty cleaner, this just put some lavender in vinegar, and vinegar is an excellent cleaner by itself too.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh yeah, by the way, it's desinfectante.
¿Cómo?
Sanitizer, desinfectante.
Desinfectante. Gracias.
De nada.
Tengo que entrenar mi boca a hablar español. Hace bastante tiempo. I had to train my mouth to speak Spanish again. I can hear it, but anyways.
It's interesting how for every language our mouth moves differently, and our even like personalities are a bit different because you express yourself differently. So it's funny in different languages.
That's one of if someone is wondering, how do I learn a language or speak a language? One of my major tips is not about vocabulary. It's actually, you need to feel like you're part of the culture, like you're a person that naturally speaks that language. Entonces, una dica que cuando una persona me pregunta, ¿cómo aprendes una lengua muy fácil, muy bien, rápido? Yo les digo que tienes que pensar, sentir que eres una persona de esta cultura, quien habla así o sí, es solamente esto. Yeah, that's it.
Claro, bueno, hablando de tomillo, hay que tener el coraje para hablar y cometer errores. Relating it back to thyme, you have to have the courage to try and say anything. And you may be wrong, but then you'll learn.
That's what happens. You've heard some of my stories, or just a couple of them, but they're best told behind the scenes. There are some really funny things you can end up saying by accident, but still do it.
Yeah. Absolutely. What was I going to say? I was going to say, oh yeah. So nowadays, you may be surprised that you'll find thymol in many products such as sanitizer or mouthwash. Entonces hoy en día pueden encontrar el ingrediente thymol en muchos ingredientes como en enjuague para la boca o en desinfectante para las manos o para limpiar la casa.
Y de medicina, usos para
Medicina,
medicar.
claro. Pero primero tal vez, first I'll just share with people. Entonces esto es naturalista.org. Y para que vean, just so that everyone can see, as Tara was saying earlier, como Tara estaba diciendo, esto es Norteamérica. Y todos estos puntitos son lugares donde crece el tomillo. Entonces, we can see that in the West Coast, it's definitely grows more. But if we look to Europe, si miramos a Europa,
Wow.
porque viene de acá, it comes from here. Entonces, it obviously just grows naturally there. And whereas mostly in North America, we use it in gardens. So it's interesting to note. Yeah, last summer, el verano pasado, I found thyme randomly in the woods. En el bosque encontré una plantita de tomillo. And I was pretty excited.
Oh. I would imagine that a lot of the recipes that have thyme would be Spanish, French, or you mentioned French. Imagino que la mayoría de las recetas con tomillo son de la España, Francia, como dijiste.
Sí, definitivamente. Y bueno, si quieren una receta fácil, an easy recipe for thyme, es una salsa, a sauce, a simple sauce. You take one or two sprigs, una o dos tallitos de tomillo, en un sartén, in a pan with some butter, con mantequilla. Y pueden echar un poco de vino blanco, white wine, unas rodajas de limón, 2 o 3 rodajas de limón, a couple, 2 to 3 rounds or slices of lemon, and then a pinch, una pizca de harina or flour, pinch of flour, and you'll cook it on medium low, cocínalo en mediano hasta que espese, until it thickens, and it'll be, you want the consistency to be like buttery, velvety, so it's going to reduce quite a bit. So se va a cocinar y se va a reducir en volumen. So start with about a cup of wine, una taza de vino, y como 2 cucharadas de mantequilla, or 2 tablespoons of butter. And yeah, just cook it on medium low until it thickens, and it will be delicious. And this sauce is great for chicken. You can like barbecue your chicken breast or whatever part of the chicken, and then finish it off in your sauce. As the sauce cooks, it's great for fish, although tarragon and fish go really, really well together. But yeah, that's just a simple, easy recipe you can make with thyme.
And is this what they call just a white sauce, the simple white sauce?
Yep.
Simplemente salsa, simple blanco.
Ajá. Sí, y puedes cambiar la hierba dependiendo, por ejemplo, si yo fuera a servir pescado, if I was going to do it with fish, I would put tarragon or dill instead of thyme. Y si fuera a hacer con carne, pues podrías poner tal vez salvia o sage, o algo así, romero, rosemary. So, but yeah, the sauce is just white wine, butter, a little bit of flour, and the flour is optional. La harina es opcional, no es necesaria. Sí, y ya, y limón.
Qué bueno, voy a tener que tratar hacer esto. I'll have to try making this, especially because I have some time left over from making the cleaner. Yo todavía tengo tomillo que sobró también en español de cuando yo hizo este limpiador.
Claro, sí, hay que usarlo. Definitely. Yeah, and it's so easy. I love making that sauce. Okay, so let's talk about some of Thyme's uses. Hablemos de los usos del tomillo. Entonces, de una perspectiva medicinal, el tomillo, or from a medicinal point of view, el tomillo es algo que decimos que es, bueno, empecemos con, because there's so many things that I'm trying to think of the best way to explain it, but if we start with maybe what we were talking about, empezamos con lo que estamos hablando, que el tomillo es antibacterial, or antibacterial, antiviral, antiviral, antimicrobial, antimicrobial, y antiséptico, antiseptic. It makes a great remedy for bronchitis. It has been used for bronchitis. Entonces, para la bronquitis. And if we think of bronchitis being, an infection in the lungs, it's usually deep in the lungs. Es una infección que ya está bien adentro en los pulmones. El tomillo, y es una infección húmeda, or it's a moist condition in the lungs. Thyme is hot, it's warming. El tomillo es calienta y seca, and it dries. It's warming and drying. And this is what, if you're new to herbalism, this is what we call energetics, which a lot of people hear that word and they think, energy and things like that, but it doesn't mean that at all. It means literally the energy that the plant produces within a person. Entonces, las energéticas en el mundo del herborismo se tratan de no una energía que no se puede ver, sino más bien el efecto energético que tiene una hierba al ser consumida. Y
like quality also, como cualidades.
Exacto, sí, cualidades. Entonces el tomillo, siendo que calienta y seca, por eso es de buen uso en la bronquitis, porque seca los pulmones y los calienta para que pueda sacar la flema. And so, like in a case like bronchitis, for example, where there's moisture in the lungs, the thyme dries and heats up and helps to expel the moisture from the lungs. And that's one of his other actions. It's called an expectorant or expectorante. Es otra acción del tomillo. Y eso significa, that means that it helps to bring out mucus o sacar las mucosidades.
It's probably why I don't really care for this herb, because I'm already dry and warm or cool depending on the situation. Entonces puede ser es por esto que yo no me gusta mucho de tomillo, porque yo tengo ya las cualidades energéticas en mi cuerpo de seco, como mi piel puede ser más al lado seca, y también puedo sentir o más caliente o más frío. Entonces, esto no es la cualidad que significa mucho, but that's probably, I think, why, did I already say this in English? I don't even remember. We're getting further along here. But the idea behind the energetics is you're seeking equilibrium, right? La idea atrás de las energéticas es que quieres llegar al equilibrio del cuerpo. You want things to be balanced in your body. So, si sientes demasiado húmedo, quieres secar un poquito o bastante. So if you're feeling humid, or you have a wet condition, you want to balance it out and dry it out, but not too much. And so you're always balancing with the opposites. Entonces quieres establecer el equilibrio de temperatura, de humedad, de varias energías o cualidades.
Exacto. And so that is good to know, because if you, for example, have a dry cough where you're hacking and it's not very productive and it's very dry, o si tienes una tos seca que no produce mucosidades, you wouldn't want to use thyme, because that will increase the dryness in your throat. Entonces, no, en ese caso no sería bueno usar el tomillo, porque eso va a secar la garganta más y empeorar la condición. So yeah, in that case, you'd want to use a moistening herb with expectorant qualities. O quisieras usar, en ese caso, una planta humectante con propiedades expectorantes también, like marshmallow, for example. Sí, como el marshmallow, pero en español no me acuerdo cómo se llama.
O al contrario, si tienes un tos o un gripe que es muy caliente, quieres usar como cereja también en español. How do you say cherry?
Cereza.
Cereza, sí. Como cereza silvestre.
Ajá.
Y ayuda a bajar la temperatura. So the wild cherry you would use, for example, for a very hot cold or cough, or not a cold necessarily. You might have a cold while you have the cough, but that's kind of weird in English, right? You can have a cold, but you'd have a hot cough. So that would be the example of an opposite, where you might have a hot cough, but you wouldn't want to use the thyme because that's hot, heating and drying. You would use something like a wild cherry bark or a cherry cough drop. Can you imagine? I mean, because there are various kinds of cough drops that are on the market. And even if you don't know about this, we typically gravitate towards the remedy that's on the market that we need. How do you say cough drop?
Como una
now did you find marshmallow?
Yeah, por ejemplo, la planta que yo decía era el malvavisco, la planta del malvavisco, que es humectante y expectorante, entonces ayuda a sacar las mucosidades, pero humecta y trae humedad. Y a cough drop es como una
estoy buscando.
Sí, esa palabra no me la sé.
Hace como un dulce para el tos.
Para la tos, sí.
So, bueno, ¿qué más? Porque estamos llegando al final de la hora.
Sí, pues bueno, es para decir que if you're new to herbalism, that's something you want to start paying attention to, is the energetics of the plants. And that simply means just how does it make you feel? And if you're curious, just eat a hot pepper, a little bit, and then see how it makes you feel. You'll feel hot. It'll flush your skin. It'll heat you up. So that's plant energetics. And then there's plants that will make you feel cold, or and then plants that dry and plants that moisten. Entonces está diciendo que para los que están aprendiendo herborismo desde el principio es muy importante aprenderse los energéticos de las plantas, y eso es tan fácil como, por ejemplo, probar un pedacito de un pimentón picante. Y vas a ver que te va a dar calor, tal vez empiezas a sudar, y te calienta el cuerpo. Entonces, that's a really good way to see what energetics is, and to help you understand how to use plants.
Yeah, it's really fascinating. So the takeaway for me, I think I'm going to try that white sauce, the salsa blanca, right?
Uh-huh.
Or for the chicken, and I'll have to come back and let you know how that goes.
Amazing. Yeah, it's a good one. And yeah, it's delicious.
Wonderful. Well, let's decide. We will have a new herb next time, and we will keep exploring the medicinal uses, the energetics, and even culinary or magical uses. Depends on each herb. Kind of has its specialties. It's really fascinating,
Yeah,
and each one is like a personality. Entonces vamos a continuar a explorar varias hierbas que tienen propiedades específicas, pero son interesantes, como son personalidades propias, son como personas de una manera. So they're kind of like people, and you get to know them, and over time you get to know them more. And so we will bring a new herb to you next week, and we could explore it together. Absolutely leave in the comments. Let us know how you like to use herbs. Entonces dejas un comentario en los comentarios, en el espacio. Si tienes una manera que le gusta usar más el tomillo, o una dica, o una pregunta, if you have a question, comment. It's really fun to hear from you. Maybe you're in one of these Mediterranean areas and you can tell us how it grows. And maybe you have the green thumb for these herbs, and would love to hear from you.
Sí, absolutamente. Déjenos saber, let us know. And if you have any questions or something you want us to cover about an herb, we'll do our best. But yeah, or herb suggestions, we're picking the ones that jump out at us the most, but they're also fun. And as Tara said, they're just each one's its own journey.
Its own character. It's fun.
Sí.
All right. Bye-bye, everybody. Take care. See you next time.